Hello and welcome back to our next video in our crash course through the elements of art. This is for my Art 2 and my Art 3 students, and as before, this is a refresher course, so if you remember this lesson from last year, it's going to be very similar, but I'm just going to be giving you the highlights and we're going to be going through it very quickly. If you have not watched the previous video, Crash Course Part 1, go back and watch that because that video leads into this video. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. In the previous video, we covered line, shape, and value. Okay, let's go ahead and look at texture. Texture, it's very simple, and again, it's kind of like duh, like the rest of it. But texture is how something feels. That's the surface quality of the artwork. And just like line, there can be actual texture and implied texture. Actual texture is something that you can actually pick up and you can actually feel. While implied texture doesn't really feel like anything, but you can imagine what it would feel like. It's kind of like this right here. You can imagine what that mane would feel like, or the horse snout, or whatever. You can imagine it. But if you want to feel this, it's just a DVD, just a cover. Okay, so let's look at some examples of texture. Now, I like to use this example right here because it's I believe it is a cup made out of rabbit fur, cup, saucer, and spoon. It's a very famous artwork, and I like to use it because my kids are like, "Ew, that's so gross." And I'm like, no, it's nice and warm and fuzzy, like a cup of tea. It makes you feel nice and warm and fuzzy on the inside. And, well, I think it's funny, but okay. So let's go on, move forward. This artwork right here, more famously known as the Melting Dog, also another very famous sculpture. This is a bronze statue. And if you were to go up and touch this, what kind of texture do you think it would have? Would it have implied texture or would it have actual texture? Well, it would have actual texture because this is an actual statue. So if you were to go up and touch it, it would feel very rough and coarse, and it would feel very rocky and bumpy because, well, it's a bronze statue made to look like a melting dog. On the other hand, this artwork is actually a drawing. This is a pencil drawing using value, just like we did in the last lesson, of Einstein. And if you were to go up and touch this, it wouldn't feel like anything. It would just feel like a flat piece of paper because that's what it is. But you can imagine what his hair would feel like right there, what his face, his wrinkles, what you could imagine the texture on that. And that is implied texture. Now, just because this artwork is a great example of implied texture doesn't mean that you have to have a lot of detail to get texture like this artwork does. Instead, you can get implied texture by very minimalistic detail. For instance, the woman's hair in this artwork, it's not straight, it's curly. And you can tell that because of the waves that the artist put into the drawing of the hair. And then we also have the dog right here, which we can tell that it's a short-haired dog because of the smudging that they did and the very short little lines that they put in his ear. And that gives the illusion that it's different textures. Now, there are some artworks that actually have both implied and actual texture. For instance, Claude Monet was an Impressionist painter, and the painting style that the Impressionists used was they tried to mimic the light as quickly as they could. So they would literally take paint and they would get it straight from the tube and they put it right on the canvas as quick as they could. They go and just put it on there without even blending it. That would give the actual texture of there being waves on the painting because they didn't blend it out and make it smooth. If you were to go up and touch an actual Impressionist painting, you would feel the bumps and ridges on it. It would have actual texture. But then the artwork itself also has implied texture. For instance, in the woman's dress, in her parasol, in the grass, in the clouds, you can imagine what those textures would feel like. So it's both implied and actual texture. Okay, so let's move on to the next element of art, which is color. Color, it sounds complicated, but it's really not. Color is whenever light comes in, hits an object, light is reflected off that object and bounces back and that is the color that you see. So, for instance, this eraser. Light is coming in, it's hitting this eraser. All of the other colors except for pink is being absorbed into this eraser, and then it's being bounced back to you. So you see the color pink as it's reflected off of this surface. And how you can test this, if you take this pink eraser into a totally pitch black room, can you see it? Well, no, you can't because there's no light. Now, if you take this exact same eraser into a haunted house or a roller rink that has a black light, could you see this eraser? Yes, you could, but it would not be pink. Instead, the black light emits a blue light. So what it would look like, it would actually look like a variant of purple. And the reason why is because the light's coming in, hitting this object, and everything but red is being absorbed into it, or pink, and it's being reflected back to you. That color is then being mixed with the blue from the light, and it makes it look like a purple. That's why if you take this piece of paper into a blacklit room, then this paper will look blue because the blue light's coming in, absorbing into the white. The white is reflected back to you, mixing with the blue, and white plus blue equals blue. Okay, so now that we've explained color, let's go on. There are three different types of color: primary color, secondary color, and tertiary or intermediate color. And if you are in my Art 3 class, I really hope that you remember what all these colors are. If you're in my Art 2 class, I can kind of see how you forget maybe tertiary or intermediate. But let's go ahead and look. Primary colors are yellow, red, and blue. Using those three colors, you can make all of the other colors on this color wheel. Now, whenever you mix two primary colors together, for instance, like yellow and red, you get what's called a secondary color, which it would be orange, because red and yellow together make orange. How you can determine what colors go together make a secondary color, you look at the primary colors on either side of it. So, for instance, green right here. The closest primary colors to green is yellow and blue. So you know that yellow and blue together make green. And the same thing with purple. Red and blue together make purple. Now, tertiary or intermediate colors. Tertiary colors are what you get whenever you mix a primary color and a secondary color together. So, for instance, if you take yellow, which is a primary color, and you mix it with orange, which is a secondary color, you get a color that is known as yellow-orange right there. So if you notice, you have yellow and orange, it makes yellow-orange. That's how the naming scale works with colors. So this color right here is not lime green. It is not light green. It is yellow and green. Just like this color takes the primary color red and mixes the secondary color orange to make red orange. So that's how you create colors using the color wheel, and how you can determine what colors make up those colors. So whenever all these colors come together in a pretty little wheel, and I've already said this, it creates a color wheel. Now there are other classifications of colors. We won't be getting into these much in this class. I cover more art theory and color theory and things like that in Art 4. But for my Art 3 class, this is something that we do typically cover, and this is called monochromatic color scheme. A monochromatic color scheme means mono, which is one, and chromatic, which is color. So one color. This entire artwork is made up of one color. It's just blues with some blacks added to it, with some whites added to it, and that's it. So it's different variations of blue in one artwork. So it's monochromatic. This is also another example of monochromatic color scheme. And like I said, in 8th grade, we do cover this, and you have the option of doing something like this. So that's my Art 3 class. Space is the area around or inside of an object, or the area that an object takes up. So it's that's basically it. Space is space. That's what it is. Now, there are two different types of space. There is positive space and there is negative space. Actually, a negative space would be right here and the positive space would be right there. There you go. Okay. Positive space is the main focus point, so it's where you're looking. So the positive space in this artwork would be the tree and the ground, while the negative space, which is where your eye is not looking, would be the background or the white. That's positive and negative space. And depending on how you look at the positive and negative space, you can actually look at an artwork two totally different ways. For instance, this is a very famous optical illusion. You either see a vase if you look at it in the positive light, or you see two faces about ready to kiss in the negative light. And this is exactly the same artwork. The only difference is the colors have been swapped. So depending on the negative or positive side that you look at, you can see two different artworks. So, distance and space. Whenever you look at distancing in space, you can actually use this to your advantage as an artist by placement and size. And you can also do this with atmospheric perspective. So, atmospheric perspective is a very big word. I'll get to that in a minute. It's a very simple concept, big word. But you can use space to actually show distance in your artwork. Typically, whenever you look at something, things that are closer to you will appear further down on the plane of the artwork, while things that are further away will actually appear like that they're higher up. And you may also notice that as things get further away from you, they get smaller. For instance, size. This guy, let me see if I can point to him right here. That guy, yep, that guy right there. This guy, he's about that tall. And this guy back here, he's roughly the same height, except this one is sitting down while this one is standing up. That must mean that either A, this guy is a massive, huge dude, or this guy's really small, or it means that he's farther away, because as things get farther away from you, they get smaller. Just like these arches. These arches, closer up, they're much wider than when they get further away. And it's the same thing if you're driving down the road and you're looking outside and you see trees. Trees, as they get further away from you, or telephone poles, they get smaller and smaller and smaller. Same thing. Well, I want you to look back at this artwork with the placement. We all agree that this looks like it's further away from us, right? Well, if we look at the size of the buildings, we would assume that because they're further away from us, they would be smaller. But in actuality, they are exactly the same size as the ones that are closer to us. The only reason that this looks like it's farther away is because they are literally stacked on top of one another. Because these look like they are further, because these look like they're further up on the plane, it gives the illusion that they're further away. In reality, if this place was real and was painted to, I don't know, correct size, these buildings would be stacked on top of one another. But anyway, let's go into atmospheric perspective. Atmospheric perspective is a very big word that just means the sky is blue. That's all it is. So if you go outside and you look straight up into the sky, you're going to see the color blue if it's a clear day. And the reason for that is because you have miles and miles of nothing but atmosphere above you. That's it. That's all there is. There's atmosphere. And believe it or not, atmosphere is all around us. It's not just in the ozone. It's all around us, not just in the atmosphere. It's everywhere. If we did not have atmosphere around us, we wouldn't be breathing. So, atmosphere is blue. We can tell that by looking up into the sky because there's nothing in between us and the atmosphere. It's just straight blue. And it doesn't matter if you're looking straight up in the sky or if you're looking straight ahead of you. The atmosphere is blue both ways. So that means that things that are further away from you are going to look a little bit bluer than things that are closer to you. And the reason for that is because the atmosphere is mixing with those colors, and it's making things look like they're bluer when they're further away. That is atmospheric perspective. So if you're driving down the road and you see a mountain way far off in the distance, it's going to look a little bit bluer than the mountain that is right in front of you. And the reason for that, it's atmospheric perspective. It's has nothing to do with those trees being any different than these trees because, well, you're probably in the same state, so it's not like you're going to be jumping borders and seeing different trees on different mountains. No, it's the same trees. It's just the color is different because of the atmosphere. Okay, let's go on, and this is the last element of art that we're going to be covering. This one is form. And form is very simple. It is a shape, like the bunch of circles that we have right here, and it has values added to it. So just like the values that we did in the last lesson, this has values added to a shape. And that's all a form is. A form is a shape that has values added to it. It makes it look 3D. That's the only difference between these two images. So let's go ahead and look at some of these pictures. This might look like a guy hanging up wallpaper. That's graffiti. Well, it looks like that, but in actuality, the whole thing is graffiti, including the guy. The guy's also graffiti. And the reason why I show this is because the shadows and around the guy create the illusion of form. So it makes him look like he's actually there. That is form. Whenever you add shading and values to a shape, it makes it look three-dimensional, just like this. Now, the artist is actually the artist, and he's standing in front of his artwork, kind of doing that right there. But the deer, it's a great example of form because you have the shape of the deer, and then you have all the colors and values added to it, which make it look like that it is actually there. So it looks like a 3D form. And the last thing that I like to show my students is one of the most famous optical illusions of all time, MC Escher's drawing hands. And it's really neat because you can see, well, let me adjust that. You can see how a line can actually come back and meet itself and create a shape. And then that shape can get values added to it, which then can turn into a form. So it's a line that turns into a shape that gets values and turns into a form. And then it circles back around and draws itself. So let me go ahead and explain what we're doing today. This may sound familiar because it's basically the same lesson we did last time whenever we had the elements of art. We are going to be making your very own form drawings, and these are great practices. I believe all artists should at least dedicate some time to do these every now and again because it's great practice. But what you're going to be doing, you're going to be selecting toys from either around your house, or if you're in the classroom, I have plenty of toys around that you can select from. I actually have an entire bin, and you are going to be breaking these toys down into basic shapes. Then you're going to be shading them, and you are going to make them into a form drawing. So remember, break these down into basic shapes. Then you are going to be shading them. And you're not going to be shading under the table or whatever they're setting on. You are actually going to be shading the toy itself, because otherwise it's going to be a bleach white toy. So for instance, this is a great example. Student example of a toy that I typically have in the classroom. And you can see the shading inside the form. That's what you want to do. You don't want to shade on the table, because if you leave it stark white and you just shade the table, it makes it look like it's sitting in something that I don't want to think about. So make sure you shade inside the form. I don't care what's on the table. Don't shade the table. Now, this is a great example. I love to show this example of Pikachu because it's really good. They have the basic shapes. You can see how they drew Pikachu with the basic shapes. You can see how they drew the ears going up and the shading all the way down around through here. It's a really great example. And then we also have these right here as well. Again, great examples of shading and shadow. If you want to add a shadow on the table, you can. I don't want that to be the only shadow. Okay, focus on the form. Focus on adding the shadows in the form first. Don't just leave the form black and white. Otherwise, it's just a shape. It's not a form. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut to my live demonstration on how you can create your very own form drawings. If you like this video, go ahead, give us a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments if you have a question. And if you are new to the channel, or if you'd like to follow along with our lessons, I'm going to be uploading my lessons throughout the next couple weeks. I'm going to try to get all of them uploaded. So If you'd like to follow along with us, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. You'll be notified of all the new lessons going up. Thank you all very much for watching, and without further ado, I'll go ahead and cut to the video. What we're going to be doing, we are going to be making a form drawing like you see here. And what you need is a toy of some kind or an object, a blank piece of paper, and a wooden pencil. And right here, I have my paper, and I have my figure that I'm going to draw. So how do you start this off? Well, you start off by looking at the shape, and you break this down into the most basic shapes that you can. And this figure is rather small, as you can see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it as big as I can on this paper. And it's going to make it a whole lot easier if you draw it bigger than if you draw it smaller. So what I'm going to do, since we saw this, I'm going to go ahead and set it down here so I can see it. And I'm going to draw it exactly the way I see it on here. And I'm going to use basic shapes to draw what I see. You're going to draw your basic shape. I'm going to start with the head right here. And you are not committed to these lines at all. It doesn't matter, okay? These are to help you. That's all these are. So that's the body that I see. And I'm going to go right down here, and I'm going to draw a little triangle right there for the ear. And I'm going to draw another one right up here. So this is the basic shape. That's what I see. From here, I'm going to go ahead and define my lines a little bit more. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to look at where this is, and you don't have to follow these lines. These lines are here to help you and guide you. You don't have to follow them. They're not set in stone. You can always go back over them later. You do not have to be committed to these. What these are, they are to help you. And once you get your lines down and you're ready to continue, then you can go on and move forward with it. So now, once you have this down, you start looking at where the light is falling on your object. And this is where form comes in. Because right now, all you got is shapes. That's it. It's not a form until you start adding in values. And remember how we held our pencil in the last video? That's how you're going to want to hold your pencil this time. So you look at the dark areas. So for me, the darkest area I have on the Pikachu is right there on the ear. So I'm going to add that in, dark value. And you add in the light values too. So dark values and then add in the light values. And I see a shadow right here on the ear as it comes down and around like that. Value down here. And I see that the eye right here is dark. Dark there as well. And then I see shadow there. Shadow up through here. And a darker shadow right there around the ear that leads up into this ear. And there's a Pikachu. And just so you know, the way that I was looking at it was about like that right there. So it was more like about like that. Yeah. So that's the way I was looking at it. Okay, so your assignment for today with form drawings, you're going to be selecting at least 2 toys and you're going to be drawing them using form drawings. Now this lesson is typically a 2-day lesson. This presentation is part of the first day, obviously, so you have approximately 15 to 20 minutes left in class. Try to go ahead and complete 1 form drawing today. Remember, shade the form. Do not shade the table. I don't care about what's on the table. I care that you shade the form. So go ahead, select a toy, pick a good angle that you want to look at it, set it off to the side, don't touch it, and draw it the way you see it. Tomorrow, whenever you go and continue this lesson, you're going to try to complete 1 form drawing, but if you can do more than that, go ahead. You have the entire class period to do nothing but form drawings. I want you to practice today. Tomorrow, I want you to put your heart and soul into it and make a really good one that you're proud of. Okay, thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, have a good one.